Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
I think you're going to see humans disappear from the roasting process pretty quickly.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Why is it that you chose coffee?
Here is quite different than it is in the US. I get treated more nicely. I sense baristas are a little bit more...
You're not cooler because you're drinking concentrated bean juice.
I bought the coffee and it turned out that there was a whiff of something weird. Coffee doesn't come from Italy. The prosciutto does, the cheese does, the wine does. And if it's from Italy, they value it as a specialty item and they will grade it to death. And if it's not from Italy...
Our friends over at ecobarista.com.au. Man, these guys not only making some of the best coffee bags, cups and that, but it's all eco-friendly stuff. They got recyclable, they got compostable. We make our bags with them. Beautiful bags. We got these made with them 3 years ago, completely custom made. Liam's doing some hand gestures at me. I don't know
Just
what that is.
hold that bag a bit closer to you.
Oh, there you go.
Right, there we go. Now we can see it. Look at that.
Okay,
Look at that bag.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Kirk is getting some bags, cups made right now. He showed me some designs. They're looking good.
Yep.
Get them made so we can have them on the pod.
Yeah,
I want to show them
look,
off.
I'm working on it. But, all good things take time.
Yep.
And Uncle Russ is cooking. We know Uncle Russ is cooking.
Russ is cooking.
True. So I'm getting, but it's, it's summer right now, right?
Yep.
So I've got my iced latte cups that look real good. And I've said it on the podcast before, it's got to be big. You got to be able to shake it. You got to have the Hoshizaki ice.
Got to have the little ice shakes.
Those eco barista cups, everyone in Melbourne should be using them.
Yeah,
Everyone
absolutely. And if you want to use them or you want to get them for your cafe or roastery, then you just go to ecobarista.com.au and you get 15% off your first purchase.
How good is that? 15% off your first purchase.
Bargain. Russ, how are you doing it?
Yeah,
You're giving it away.
What's the question you usually ask me?
Oh, I just normally, it's more of a personal question, but I just wanted to know, are you an eco warrior?
No, I'm not. I'm an eco barista.
Oh, it's still here. 2025.
That's going to be the best ad read yet.
2025.
Let's go. All right. Welcome back to the It's Just Coffee podcast, everyone. My name is Kirk Pearson.
And I'm Rowan Cook.
And together we are
It's Just Coffee.
By random chance, I'm a bit of an opportunist when it comes to securing guests for this podcast when I need to be, right? And it's always better when we do it in person. So last Friday when it was the last hour at the cafe, lo and behold, I'm going to pick something up from outside and Scott Rao just randomly is walking towards the cafe. It's every barista's dream for that to happen.
Yeah.
You might be modest and think, I'm just Scott Rao. But anyway, it's an honor when you walk in. And so I thought to myself, my goodness, I have to ask, and you graciously accepted. So thank you, Scott, and welcome to the It's Just Coffee podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
You come to Australia probably once a year, don't you?
Yep.
How do you find it?
I love Australia.
What are your favorite things about?
Australia is basically what the US would be if we spent about 20 years fixing our problems.
Okay. All right. The hot takes is at the end of the podcast. So,
It might be all hot takes. You never know.
Yes.
Well, we say we like it hot.
Australia's great. The coffee scene's wonderful. Love the food standard here. Come here in summer. The weather's blissful. So.
Is it a different contrast? Like I've never experienced a white Christmas. So like the beach Christmas, white Christmas.
Yeah, to me it's a bit odd to have it be warm on Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Not having eggnog and such. Yeah.
And I will say for those listening at home, obviously everyone that's in the coffee industry knows who you are, but for those who are maybe more on the home side or not knowing it, Scott is one of the world's most recognized coffee roasters and coffee consultants. He's created a lot of the methods that people use today when making their coffee, roasting their coffee, and added so much to the coffee community. So we're so lucky to have him here. We're going to learn a lot today.
He both literally and figuratively wrote the book on coffee roasting.
Yes.
So we're gonna dive into that. But we usually start the coffee podcast with a little bit of coffee news, and today Rowan's got a breaking story.
Yeah, I got a breaking story here.
Sounds and all.
And just a little bit of insight. We were talking about this just before the pod, that not only an amazing coffee expert here, but also a bit of a health guru. So this little bit of coffee news, I'll be really interested to get your take on it. So drinking coffee lowers the chance of heart disease. A recent study in the US has shown that people who drink coffee in the morning will live longer than those who don't. Not only that, but they are 31% less likely to develop heart disease. Well, I guess that's great. I'm sitting on 6 coffees a day, so I'll probably live to about 600 years. I think that kind of equates to.
I'm sure that's how it works.
Yeah. Now, have you read anything about this? Do you have any insight?
I have. I don't necessarily know the mechanism. I mean, I know that coffee is known to be a gut bacteria modulator in a positive way, so it tends to support the growth of a lot of good bacteria, and it suppresses the growth of some bad bacteria. It seems to decrease the risk of colon cancer. It seems to be relatively healthy for your heart, but I don't think anyone really understands the mechanisms, why it works this way.
They're just noticing that these things are happening.
Yeah,
they can numerically prove that there's like a correlation between having that and good
what's
health.
interesting is that these effects seem to peak at about 4 to 6 cups a day, however they're measuring cups, which is odd, right? Because even as a coffee drinker, you think 6 cups a day is a lot.
Yeah.
But it seems that the people who receive the most health benefits in terms of longevity from coffee drink 4 to 6 cups a day.
This is the best news that I've heard in such a long time.
Well, while we're on the health subject, and if you don't have any input on what I'm about to ask, then feel free to not answer. But I've seen this clip going around where basically this woman on Instagram is saying like you should only drink organic or decaf coffee because otherwise you're getting all these chemicals and stuff, and it's no good for you. Any truth to that, or?
I mean, there's outside of the world of organic coffee, I think there's degrees of pesticides and such in your coffee. I think extremely high-grown, high-quality coffees tend to be sprayed a lot less than, let's say, the clear-cut, low-grown Brazils that are machine harvested and such. And so I think she's not wrong, but she's probably leaving out that there are a lot of coffees that are not certified organic that are really quite low in any sort of residues.
Yeah, okay. Because sometimes I just don't know what to believe because I see so many coffee and health-related stories coming out there, and sometimes they contrast each other. Never really know what to believe. But
yeah. Now, I do have a few more. Like, I've only just learned that you're a health expert as well. Or I'm going to call you a health expert. Let's say that. We'll say, what is it? Not a degree, but he's
certainly not my claim.
Self-learning, I will say it. Okay. So we might have some more questions later. But first, we'll dive into some coffee stuff, I think.
Yeah, please.
Now, the first one I just want to ask is for someone that's one of the most well-known person in coffee, what are you making? What's your go-to coffee, let's say, every day? Like, what's your just main go-to?
I typically drink wash filter coffee in the morning. I usually use the Hoop or the Next Level Pulsar. Both are really easy to use, no bypass brewers. They're easy to travel with because you don't need a special kettle. Just travel with a hand grinder, usually the Hoop and a scale. That's
okay, amazing. So that was going to be my next question: is how are you brewing it, or what are you doing? And so, for someone this skill level, people will want to like chime in. Can you run us through like this no bypass kind of method, this kind of extraction, and then also what hand grinder are you using?
Just come stand us close to the mic.
Sure.
Just a touch.
So bypass would refer to if you had a V60 or a Kalita, some liquid could go around the filter and out without really passing through the whole coffee bed. A no bypass brewer would be one like the Hoop or the Pulsar, where all the water has to pass through the coffee grounds to get out of the brewer. This tends to be a good thing in terms of decreasing the risk of astringency. And both the Hoop and the Pulsar are quite similar in their mechanism. I prefer the Hoop slightly because the coffee bed is a bit narrower. So at a normal dose of, let's say, 20 to 22 grams, you have a slightly deeper coffee bed, which also reduces the risk of astringency. I really don't like astringency in my coffee, so anything I can do to reduce it, I will do.
Yep. So you're saying rather than like having a wide bed, you want it kind of narrow with like more coffee to pass through?
Yeah. I mean, the wider the bed, the taller it would, the wider the bed, the larger the dose you would need to maintain a certain bed height. And if the bed is very shallow, what happens is the channels that let the astringent particles out of the coffee bed, more of those channels will reach the bottom of the bed and then will potentially let astringent particles out.
Right.
So if you have a deeper coffee bed, a lot of those channels will dead end or sort of cul-de-sac at a more denser spot in the coffee bed. And so they won't necessarily have much negative effect on the brew.
I used a Pulsar brewer in competition in Brewers Cup not too long ago, and the amount I used I think it was a washed geisha, but an Esmeralda washed, and I was able to get it to taste so much better using a Pulsar. I do struggle to use it in the cafe though, because it's like between brews it's a little bit difficult to clean, like to make sure it's like 100% clean. But it's a wonderful brewer. Yeah, it's an absolutely wonderful.
Well, maybe I'll bring you a hoop to the cafe and we can try that, because it's quite a bit narrower than the Pulsar. So a 20-gram dose will give you slightly better results than the Pulsar. The Pulsar is really probably optimized at 30 grams or more. Which is probably more than you want to use at the cafe.
That's a lot of coffee that you would make with something like that. But let's get into the main better questions that we have for you. And firstly, I want to start with you're someone that I've looked up to for a long time, but I really want to know, why is it that you chose coffee as your kind of main vocation?
As a kid, I thought I would open restaurants. I was really fascinated with the food industry. I always wanted to own my own business. I was the kind of kid in grade school and high school who was always hatching schemes to make money. And
selling candy bars at your locker?
Basically, yes. And I had a tutoring business through high school, stuff like that. And
I sold illegal Zippos in my school and out of the lighters outside of my locker. That's how I did it.
Exactly. So, and then I really didn't like coffee, though, when I was a teenager. And arguably, I never had a good one. Right, there wasn't much good coffee back then, and everything I'd ever tasted was quite burnt or unpleasant in some way, maybe instant coffee and such. And when I was about 20 or 21, I tried a coffee from a new shop around the corner from where I lived when I went to university, and I loved it, and I was really surprised. I didn't even know I could like coffee, and it was delicious. So I went from not liking it at all to thinking, oh, it can be delicious. And that guy, his name is James. He's still a dear friend. He became a mentor to me. And at that point, I realized, I really loved going to coffee shops. I didn't really like coffee much. But then once I found his coffee and realized that he was doing something special, that got me excited about opening a coffee shop instead of a restaurant.
Do you recall what that coffee was?
I do. Funny enough, it was Sumatra. No, it was a Java Blawan Estate was the first cup I had there. It was a washed coffee. And then I was working at a pizza shop. My boss had brought me a cup of coffee. And I was like, wow, I like this. So I took a break and I went down to the coffee shop and I met James. And I said, wow, Rob brought me this cup of Java. I thought I didn't like coffee, but it was delicious. And then he gave me another cup and he said, oh, this is a different coffee. And I was like, no. 21 years, never had a good coffee. And now you already changed it. He laughed at me. He's like, this one's on me. Just try it. And it was a Sumatra, which, to be honest, I may not like so much these days. But it was also quite a bit better than anything else I'd ever had. And I thought, okay, this guy knows something.
It's amazing how you can have that moment sometimes as well. I think the biggest clear moment for me was when Ben Morrow made me a cappuccino. So Ben Morrow, very well-known barista from St. Ali, now at Manhattan, has his own business called Manhattan Coffee Roasters. But he made me a coffee that was just like, well shit, this changes the game. Like I was like, I'm chasing this forever. I don't know if I've ever had a milk coffee quite so good to this day. Did you have a similar moment, Rowan?
Yeah, there was a couple. I mean, I think I've said on the pod before, mine was just like that Ethiopian, and still to this day, I use a lot of Ethiopian coffees as that entry point for people who come to me and go like, oh, coffee tastes the same. And I'm like, this is an easy one to kind of change that perception for you and really show you something with like florals and berries and whatever it is, and orange. So that was kind of my first one kind of coming in. And that was probably, I'd gotten into coffee and espresso and milk-based drinks, but coming into the specialty world, it might have been back in the 3 bags full day that it was having the Ethiopian there.
I'm going to do my Anyhauser. This is where I segue onto the next question. But you had your first cafe in Massachusetts, so Boston, capital of Massachusetts. I've read some of your books and it brushed me up. It was quite a few years ago, but did you have some controversy around one of your cafes? Like you had some...
Yeah, so the first cafe I opened was in 1994. I was 22 years old.
Year I was born.
Yeah. Thank you.
You look great.
Thanks. I was 22.
There's no filter on this guy. Sorry, just like the
coffee. During the first year I was open, I started roasting coffee, and I started getting these phone calls. People just yelling at me on the phone and hanging up the phone, but not really having a conversation. And I tried to stop them and say, what's the problem exactly? What can I do to accommodate you? And they just would say things like, I just want you out of business. And they'd hang up the phone. And turned out that they were unhappy with the smell of the roasting, which I didn't fight them about. I mean, roasting is not the most pleasant smell. And I would try to accommodate them. I'd say, can I roast at night? Can I roast on the weekends? And they would just always say the same thing. We just want you out of business. there was a bit of, I was an outsider in a small town. There was a bit of that whole hazing sort of, we just don't want you here kind of thing. And then the health inspector from the town came and was yelling at me in a very kind of aggressive, inappropriate way. And the Board of Health had this kind of illegal fake meeting in the basement of the community center of the town at like 9 o'clock at night on a weekday. And one of the people who was complaining told me about it. And of course I knew this was some kind of weird setup. And I went there and they insulted me. They lied about their powers to shut down my business. And I really thought I lost my business. I really thought this was the end. And I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning I called an attorney. The attorney said, there's a due process. They can't just do that. You have time. It takes months for them to do what they say they can do. And then when I saw the people who were at the meeting, they all denied the meeting ever happened. It was very kind of movie-esque.
What meeting? This is some small town stuff right here.
Small town gaslighting BS going on, right?
Yeah.
But they made a huge mistake by having that meeting because they showed their cards. I knew what I was up against. I knew it was very serious. I may not have taken it so seriously otherwise. But then they had an official version of the meeting that never happened, and they had to announce that to the public. And when that meeting came around, I had an attorney. I had a friend's dad who was an expert in industrial air quality issues. And one of my customers convinced me to write a letter and give it to all the it was a university town, to give it to all the non-students who were customers of mine. And sure enough, the meeting came around and hundreds of people came. And these people were pissed because this wasn't the first time that these people in this town had sort of tried to abuse or get rid of a new business. And they were really in the way of having a vibrant town. And these people basically walked in. I remember.
NIMBYs.
What's that?
NIMBYs.
Yeah.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah. I remember one guy, this guy, Fred, who was a friend of mine. He was this very large, intimidating Native American policeman from a town next door. And he walked in, he patted me on the shoulder. He's like, "Don't worry about it. Those people aren't getting out of here till we get our way." I was like, okay.
That is the biggest U-turn on the story I could have possibly imagined. Because I loosely remember the story. But that is just the ultimate, the town came to bat for you. That's awesome.
It was amazing. I mean, because I really felt so unwelcome in this town.
Yeah. And you're so young.
Yeah. Oh God, I was stressed out. But I was also like a very feisty 22-year-old man. I grew up in New York City, and I had a very much an F you attitude to people who mess with me. Like the Board of Health guy would come and I'd be like, F you, I was just, these people were to me unethical. And
that's interesting you say that, because my girlfriend just got back from New York and she's like, there's just a grit in New York that it's unlike any other city. I haven't been there, so I don't understand.
Where in New York were you from?
Brooklyn.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Grew up with the grit.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, the three complainers got kicked out of the meeting because they kept misbehaving, and now the newspapers were there, the lawyers were there, hundreds of people were there to witness it, and then it was basically me and the Board of Health, and their job was to negotiate. And I had already spent $30,000 on some equipment to clean the air from the roasting, but it didn't work that well. And I offered to purchase another machine that was another $30,000, and ultimately, we had our way because they couldn't say no, and it all resolved itself eventually.
oh my God, yeah.
But
What a wild, you hear the end of that story and you could never piece together that it was about someone roasting coffee in a small town.
It's true.
In Massachusetts.
Yeah, the newspaper were there, it was going off.
This small town took itself very seriously.
Right. So you had that, you sold that cafe, and then you moved to New Zealand. Is that right?
I traveled for a few years.
Okay.
And in my travels, a friend recommended I go to New Zealand. He said I would love it, and I did. And I ended up staying there for about a year and a half.
Which part of New Zealand?
I ended up staying in Wellington for a while. And I'd visited Australia as well on that trip, and really liked the coffee culture. I felt that U.S. was always a filter coffee dominated culture until then, and Australia, New Zealand, obviously espresso, milk-based beverages, and I learned a lot. It was great. It was inspiring to see that milk beverages had evolved so much further here than they had in the U.S.
Can I ask? I was going to ask you this later in the pod, but I think it's appropriate to do it now. In your travels, you're a well-traveled man. What are your top 3 coffee cities in the world? And if you could, and we'll make a reel out of this, so if you could just face the camera and say, my top 3 cities are.
Honestly, that's a really hard question. Melbourne's definitely one of them. Not just saying that. It's really tough.
Because you can, to add a bit of a layer of context here, you're traveling the world, teaching people how to roast and consulting them how to improve their coffees. So, naturally you'll have a pretty good grip for this.
I mean, there are a lot of cities, let's say Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a very nice standard for coffee, but it's also quite a small city by some standards. And you can definitely get really good coffee in Copenhagen. But as far as just a place like Melbourne just has an insane number of good coffee places. I wish it was a little bit tilted toward, say, high quality green filter coffee, but overall, I mean, you can get reliably decent coffee here. Same thing with Sydney.
Yeah, it's just such big espresso culture.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say?
I was going to say, we just had Matt on the pod, and his hot take was that he thinks Tokyo or Japan has overtaken Australia as the best coffee in the world.
It could be. I mean, I was thinking, I was about to say, I've never been to Tokyo.
Okay.
I went to Seoul once for 2 days. I haven't spent much time in China. So, I mean, who knows? I mean,
You've never been to Tokyo?
No.
Oh, wow. You would love it. And
I'm sure,
you'll have a great time. And I would add to my list that Seoul's probably in the top 3 for me.
Yeah.
When I was in Seoul, I thought that was unbelievable. Places like Center Coffee, Fritz.
So I don't feel quite qualified to say what the best 3 are because so many places I haven't been.
Well, sorry, were you going to say
I was just going to elaborate on the living in New Zealand. What was the coffee experience like there? Like, because what would be the most famous? I mean, Old Press is super famous coming out of New Zealand, right? They've had a huge influence across. What was your experience like?
I was mostly in Wellington, and Wellington's a lot like Melbourne in a sense. It's just cafes everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And filter coffee really wasn't a thing back then. But most of the influence I took away from it was the milk texturing was much better than what you find in the U.S. The beverages were smaller. U.S. beverages tend to be so large, and thankfully that's changing a bit. But the smaller beverages put things in better balance. Just the end result was much better.
I want to ask you, I want to get into sort of the coffee roasting space now. And can I start by just asking you, like, what's your loose definition for what coffee roasting really is? Like,
well, I mean, green coffee. Coffee is the seed of a fruit. Every coffee cherry, as we call it, has typically 2 seeds in it. And they need to be roasted to have the characteristic flavors that we think of as coffee. I mean, you could conceivably grind and steep green coffee. It's just not that pleasant.
Tastes like rice or something.
Yeah. And you have to cook it. So what is coffee roasting? It's heating them, to the point where they're brown and toasty, right?
That's a lot more simple and concise than I thought it'd be. I thought it'd be like words like Maillard reaction flying around there and all sorts of things. But, you did well. And so But there's different ways, there's different mechanisms for roasting coffee as well, right? So, like, I've done your roasting seminar previously a couple of years back and learnt a lot. So there's, drum roasters, roasters that run off. Get my words stuck up here. So,
gas.
There's gas roasters, infrared roasters, air roasters. Like, there's many different ways to do it.
Sure.
So, like, give our listener like an introduction to coffee roasting, if you would.
Sure. So the most common technology over the years has been a gas drum roaster, where there's a flame directly under the drum. The drum is a cylinder on its side, a bit like your clothes dryer at home. And the flame is both directly heating the drum surface as well as heating the air that gets sucked through the drum using an exhaust fan. So you have a combination of conduction, which is heating through direct contact between the beans and the drum surface, and convection, which is heating via the gas passing through the bed of coffee beans. That works great. No problem, really. Air roasting, where you have, let's say, a fluid bed, which is typically this just empty box, which has hot air that gets pushed through the bed of coffee beans, and they fluidize, they rotate in this way where they're just sort of lofted, a lot like an air popcorn popper. That's a very efficient way to roast coffee as well. And air roasting, in theory, is better than drum roasting in certain ways, because in drum roasting you have this conduction. It takes a bit of skill and planning to avoid excessive conduction. Now, if you want really light roast coffee that's developed well in the center and not much in the way of roasty flavor, and you want to optimize flavor clarity, then you would either want an air roaster or you would want to use a drum roaster very carefully. If you want, say, a dark roast, or you're making a sort of espresso in Italy, or you want something where you care a lot about body and not so much about flavor clarity, you might actually want the conduction that a drum roaster would provide.
Right. So for a more specialty kind of coffee that we're looking at, air roasting, you would say, is the superior method.
It can be. So the biggest hindrance, the reason why not everyone's using an air roaster until now, there just haven't been that many good air roasting machines out there. It's one of those things for decades. I mean, since I've been born, people know air roasting works really well. It just hasn't been something that's been on offer with a lot of good options.
Right. So you think that could be maybe a place for a lot of innovation and excelling?
It's happening.
It's happening. It's being made.
I mean, Loring, forgive me if I don't know. Maybe they began 18 or 20 years ago. Loring has definitely had a huge impact on the industry. Civets, who had patented the fluid bed roaster about 40, 50 years ago, he died 8-10 years ago, and his company recently got bought by another guy named Michael, who is trying to revive it and bring back the fluid bed. At Prodigal, we use a machine called IMF, which is a lot like a Loring in the sense that there's recirculation, and it's an air roaster with a drum that is simply there to make sure that the beans rotate evenly. And there's several other air roasters on the market now.
So that also brings me up. You said that, imagine the roaster like your washing machine at home. Pitching a business idea to you here. Me and you mod my washing machine at home, turn it into a roaster, start a roastery called Washed Coffee Only.
Good. All right, done.
Or
yes, he's in. He's in.
using the dry process.
The dryer above, the dry process. That's your competing roastery down the road.
It's like my best singer I've ever done on the show. That's my claim to fame.
So, in saying that though, coffee roasting, interesting thing. You obviously started so long ago. One of our listeners listening in today is like, I want to get into coffee roasting 2025. Is there any advice you'd have for them? Is there anything different?
Yeah. So I get this question often. And I think, especially if you're on the younger side, let's say you're in your 20s, I think a lot of people choose their next job primarily based on how much they'll get paid or maybe how directly appealing the job is. But if your goal is long-term to be extremely successful at something, forget how much money you're going to make. Forget how appealing the job is. Go work for the most competent person that you possibly can so that you can learn from them, right? Who cares whether you're going to make X or X plus $4 an hour or something like that? Go get the experience, right? I don't hire and train roasters, but I mean, if you came and worked for me as a roaster, effectively you should be paying me because you'd be learning so much, and that would give you, so much value in your future, right?
Yeah, especially if you face the market, if you would.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it was like, that was some of my early advice I think I gave on this pod when I was talking about working in coffee. I was like, there was a place that I worked for 3 years and thought you become the head coffee person there. You think you know everything. Then I go somewhere a little bit better. And in 6 months, I'd learned 10 times what I'd learned that entire time. Yeah. Then I went somewhere even better. And then in 2 days, I'd learnt more because they were so good compared to the other ones. So finding that right place and that knowledge is just invaluable.
Can I ask, what's probably the most misunderstood thing about coffee roasting? Like if you're about the job itself, because I always think to myself, well, I say to a lot of people, one thing I learned about doing a coffee roasting class with Craig Simon, so I did one with Craig Simon, great roaster. But I think the thing I learned most of it is that I never want to be a coffee roaster because the job's just, I realized the job's not for me. I couldn't handle myself as a coffee roaster.
Roasting, and I think this is what you're referring to, roasting is repetitious and monotonous.
Yeah.
And you stand there, you lift the beans up, you watch them, you do a bunch of tasks, you're a machine. You do this thing over and over and over. And for some people, that's awesome. And for some people, it's the worst thing in the world. Yeah.
Because I literally, like the moment of clarity it has, look, I'm really glad I did that. I learned a lot, but I'm not doing that for the rest of my life. And, I think it takes a certain personality because it's so much of it's cupping as well if you really want to develop yourself as a roaster, because that's the way you kind of work at the quality of your roast, right?
Yes.
So it's like there's a lot more to it than just, come here, turn the roaster on.
Because would you say you're not learning too much in the actual roasting process to that point? It's just monotonous. Whereas I think one of the reasons I was so drawn to coffee and doing it is like when I started making espresso is like every shot could be better and every coffee could be better. And there was that endless pursuit. Like on the next one, I'm going to do this. I reckon I let too much air in that time in the milk. I'm going to adjust myself this way. And I think that's why I liked it, because it was constant self-improvement. But if, you're standing in front of the screen, it's like, I'm just trying to hit the same thing each time. Maybe that would be a bit harder to kind of knuckle through mentally, or for different personality types.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rowan, this next question I'm going to actually save for later, so I'm skipping one. So I want to ask you, so what are the best resources out there later? What are the best resources out there now for someone who currently is a roaster that wants to learn more?
Okay, well, self-serving as it is, I mean, I put out books for a reason.
We acknowledge you wrote
if you're
the
an
book.
experienced roaster, the Coffee Roasting Best Practices is the best book out there. Ditto for seminars. I think talking with and cupping with experienced roasters, experienced green buyers is critical. There isn't much in the way of resources. I mean, one of the reasons I do what I do is there's always been a lack of resources in coffee. I wrote my first book because I just wish I had the book when I got started, right? And I was like, well, no one's ever written this book, so I guess I'll write it, right? And SCA's resources are generally not very practical, and they're all incredibly basic. Even their advanced courses are so basic that it's a little bit of an insult to your intelligence sometimes. Just the way it is. And,
okay. So would you like to see some additional things added to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they take the approach of there's a large group of diverse people, so we have to simplify everything to death to make sure everybody completely understands. But a little bit like when you were in elementary school, when that's the teacher's attitude, then when you're the smart kid in class, you get nothing out of it, right? And so if you're always gearing for the lowest common denominator, then you're not really helping the top half of the class, right? I think they could have a little bit more trust that people can follow along if you take them somewhere a little bit more advanced, and they just don't. But I definitely think they could and should.
So what would you say your emotional motivation of the book then? Because obviously there's a missing hole for that knowledge, but what was your motivation to put in all that time and effort to fill it?
I know this sounds silly and I can't quite explain it, but I really care about making coffee better.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that when you care about something, when you do something, you begin to have this almost aesthetic preference for it to be done well. And you know how it is. If you are really into something, whether it's coffee or whether it's some personal pursuit, when you see it done poorly or sloppily, it kind of bugs you.
Yeah,
right.
It's like when you walk down the street with a graphic designer and they're seeing logos up on the top.
You're also kind of damaging, the experience for someone else as well. There's plenty of good people out there, but you damage their reputation by kind of doing a bad job of it, in my opinion. So that might be just my take, but.
I know there's so many pieces to this, right? To me, making coffee well is very respectful of the people who produce the coffee. It's respectful of the customers who are paying for the coffee. That's something that in all of the online chatter about, my life as a barista is so hard and this, that, like almost no one has any respect for the customer. No one ever talks about that. Like hospitality, like the people who are spending their money.
So what does that respect look like to you?
It looks like working efficiently, having a sense of urgency, caring about the quality, listening to what they want rather than imposing what you think they should want, and respecting it. Because there are going to be people who aren't as picky as you or I, or don't quite have quite the same quality standard, but what they like is what they like. Just if that's what they want, do your best to give them the best version of that.
Well, this is an interesting thing you bring up, and I've been harping on about this lately a lot, and within the context of like all these articles saying that coffee's going to cost so much soon, and you and I even discussed it last week, and I'm really mad because it's bullshit. But what one of the elements of it that really pisses me off is that it's like coffee shops in Melbourne actually enjoy a really good relationship with our customers, like collectively. It's part of the social fabric of this city, and and I kind of get where you're coming from. It's like. What annoys me so much about it is because you're kind of pissing someone off to the point where like, well, hang on, that's the part of their life they really enjoy, and you kind of make something up and, potentially deterring them from wanting to go and do it. And I guess maybe you're coming from the same vein.
It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from McDonald's, Popeyes, Pizza Hut, Wendy's, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a hamburger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
I have to say that hospitality here is quite different than it is in the US.
How so?
I get treated much, whether people know me or not, I get treated more nicely here. I sense baristas are a little bit more focused on what they're doing. They're a little bit less focused on themselves here. In the US, there's a little bit more like, oh, I hate my job. Oh, I'm resentful that I have to work so hard. That kind of attitude has crept into US hospitality in a way it hasn't quite crept into Australian. And so I do see it. I do see the lovely relationship between the customers and the baristas here in cafes. And it's, I wish we had that in the US. We don't have enough of it.
And that's why I think it's something worth fighting for. But back to coffee roasting. Mm-hmm. What advancements in coffee roasting would you like to see in the next 5 years? With all that you've learned over the time,
sure.
What do you want to see happen in the next 5 years?
So I'm going to say something maybe that might be a little surprising to some people, which is that I think roasting is a solved problem. In other words, we don't understand, and we'll never understand all the chemistry in roasting. It doesn't matter. What we do understand is we do understand best practices to get really good development and without defects out of the roasting process. And now it's just a matter of machines catching up to our knowledge. So like the machine that I use is quite well designed for allowing me to get very predictable, very consistent results. And I think, we need more of that. Air roasters that operate based on inlet temperature control. In other words, instead of saying I'm using gas 80, 70, 60, instead you're saying I'm using inlet temperature 400, 380, 360, which gives you a little bit more control and consistency in your roasting. So what I want to see is I want to see more automation. I want to see more machines that are designed properly for optimized quality, development, consistency. And it is happening slowly, but the progress is a funny thing where it seems to, it's sort of like someone says something that the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed, right? And we know what we need to do, and some companies are going there, some aren't, and it just feels like some companies are operating with an attitude from 40 years ago, and some companies are very forward-thinking, and hopefully, more and more companies will embrace automation and the things that will make roasting better.
Now, would you think that is coffee necessarily what you're passionate about, or is it what you're good at? Because on your website, it says that you love Sencha green tea more than you like coffee.
What's going on there,
And now
Scott?
we're talking about wellness and that kind of thing. So
I would just say that coffee is one of many interests I have. I jokingly tell people when, people say something like follow your passion, you do what you're passionate about. I always tell people do what you love second most in life, because if you do it for your career, your favorite thing is not going to be your favorite thing anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So on that note, what's your favorite thing? If coffee's your second favorite thing, what's your favorite thing?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm not kidding.
The endless pursuit.
I got into coffee because I really initially loved cafes. I loved, around the time I was in university, there were all these cafes that opened that would be open till 3 or 4 in the morning, and my friends and I would go and study there. And it was this great, we were too young to go to bars. And it was this great, third place, so to speak, where we had a sense of community and socializing. And then that led into, finding coffee that I liked. And that's really what got me into the industry, was just that I loved cafes and the way they bring people together. And could you imagine if tomorrow Melbourne had no cafes? What would Melbourne be like?
Sydney without beaches.
Yeah.
But, it would change the fabric of the city.
Absolutely.
Right? Cafes are incredibly important to me when it comes to socializing and community. And that's actually the part of coffee I love the most. It's not the roasting, it's not the cupping. Those things are great, but it's really what coffee and cafes do for a community, for giving people a sense of place and a sense of belonging.
We actually discussed this in the last podcast with Matt, talking about AI, and we spoke about, and we did with Sonam as well, that the skill of being able to make coffee in the future manually might actually be more valuable than it ever has been, because, in a world where sort of technology is in abundance and, there's a post-scarcity world, Matt called it, how do you get enjoyment? And I think the human experience will sort of matter so much more in a context like that. And I think that's kind of, to summarize what you just said you love most about cafes, I think that it'll kind of age really well in time. Do you agree with that?
It could. I mean, I definitely see a world where there's a lot more technology, a lot more, you know, about Luckin, the Chinese company.
Yeah.
Everything's so automated, right? I mean, there'll be a lot of that for sure. And it might be that we go to that quirky place where there's a guy with a lever machine.
Charles Babinski.
And it's exactly like Charles, and it's a high-end experience because it's sort of this novelty, and it's understood that it's a high-maintenance thing. But I
love the word novelty in that. Getting to that point.
But that also may be very much in the minority. There may not be so many such places.
Yeah, but even still, that would make it all the more special, right? If it's such a rare thing, that would make it even better. I want to ask you about decaf, because you're a big decaf drinker. Or at least you have been previously. When in years that you've come to Australia previously, I've made you plenty of decaf long blacks.
Okay.
A lot of people that like may not be in the industry might be surprised to learn that like people within the industry, specialty industry, we actually have quite a positive view of decaf nowadays. It's evolved to be quite positive in my time anyway.
I used to drink more decaf than I do now. Ever since I started Prodigal, I've been working on my caffeine tolerance because it was just necessary. We cup a lot. We try to cup. I try to only have coffee when I have food in my stomach. So we cup after breakfast, we cup after lunch. And maybe 5 years ago, if I did that, I would have not been able to sleep. So I kind of built up my caffeine tolerance again. And now I haven't been consuming decaf as often. I think the average consumer just hasn't actually had a pretty good decaf. And so they just assume it's terrible. But we all know that there's pretty decent decaf out there.
Yeah. And it also stems from an age, I think, when people drank coffee as fuel, not for flavor. And there was this thing of like, well, why would you even drink coffee if you're not getting the caffeine? That's why you're doing it. As you said, you hadn't had a good coffee until you were a certain age, you know. Yeah. So I think now there's that stigma's carried over, and we're starting to see that slowly go away. We just had Fleur from Market Lane on, she's putting a decaf on the menu for the first time ever because she's finally found one or worked with one that she's like, this, you would not know it's decaf. Yeah. So I think that will slowly change, especially with health as well. I think, you know, some and caffeine intolerances and all that, I think we'll see a boom of it coming up. Speaking of that kind of thing, mushrooms in coffee, collagen in coffee. The big thing is putting things in your coffee for health benefits. Now, you might say, don't put anything in your coffee, but if you were to say to put one thing in your coffee that might help you throughout the day, do you have an answer for that?
That might help you throughout the day.
Oh, not through the day, just in general.
The only thing I know this is going to be weird. The only thing I've ever put in coffee is salt.
Salt? Why is that?
Because when I'm traveling internationally and I'm at some airport and it's 5 a.m. and the only thing available is Starbucks, salt makes Starbucks 10 times better.
This is actually...
Get rid of the bitterness.
This is actually an interesting thing because I was told by Simon Gawthron, who's the founder of Apex Labs, that he actually told you to come to Project Zero last week. That's kind of an extension of what you're saying, right? These mineral concentrates kind of like have the power to really enhance our coffee in ways.
Absolutely.
And I like how, you know, Lance has done it with Lotus and, you know, and Simon's doing it with Apex Labs now. I love this. And I've got them on display in our cafe and people come up and use it all the time. And it's great. It's like seasoning your coffee.
Yeah.
So just quickly, like finishing on that thought. So salt in your Starbucks because you have to. How does that change the cup?
Okay. So it cuts bitterness tremendously. The way to use the salt, I mean, if you're at home and you have a digital scale, great. Put in 0.15 grams of salt per 100 grams of filter coffee. Assuming you don't have a scale and you're at that airport, take your Starbucks, mix it into, 50-50 into 2 cups. Put a little salt in one of the cups, sip it, put a little salt, sip it until you can taste the salt. As soon as you taste the salt, stop, pour the other half back in, and now you're at the right level to cut the bitterness about 80-90%.
You heard it here first. You can make Starbucks tolerable, get a little salt sachet, do a little pre-mix in the cafe, and you're on your way.
Yeah.
You can get your shit, you can polish a turd with a little bit of salt. You can just salt bay inside, dilute it. I actually like that. So I can go to the airport, just get some table salt and just like,
Yep.
Okay, all right, airport hack.
You're one of the most influential people in coffee. Is there one kind of technique or something that you've developed that's kind of been spread throughout the coffee community that you're most proud of or think has had the most impact?
RAO Swirl.
What's that?
RAO Swirl. Anyone?
I did not invent the swirl.
Who invented this word?
And why is it named after you?
Yeah.
That's a great question, but I think James invented it.
James Hoffman.
So yeah, so way back when I wrote my second book, and I was recommending people use a spoon to stir their V60s and such, and that apparently made me the devil. A lot of people were toying with variations on that to avoid what we call the high and dry grounds. And I think along the way, James was the first person to just swirl the thing to do it. And the swirl turned out to be better than stirring. But someone named it after me, it caught on, and I'm like, I never,
We haven't just like, screw it, I'll just roll with it.
I mean, I've when somebody says it, I'm like, I didn't invent it, but I don't know what else to do. It's weird.
Has James ever been like, hey, could have...
Oh, we talked about it once. I was like, I don't think anyone did that before you. He's like, yeah, I think I invented it, but I don't know.
What's something...
Oh, wait, just on that, was there any other techniques or something that you've kind of...
I've done a lot of little things. I don't know that there's like one thing that stands out. I mean, my whole thing throughout my career has been incremental improvement, right? So in the 90s, I noticed that when the espresso hopper got low, the grind would get effectively coarser. So I put a second hopper on top of the first hopper and set up a system so that the bottom hopper never felt any change in weight, right? I was the first person to put a timer on an espresso grinder.
Oh,
so
really?
I did that in the 90s as well.
I mean, that's huge.
Around the year 2004 or something like that, I had a business partner who used to own a machine shop, and I was so frustrated that the tampers and the baskets didn't always fit the same. Mm-hmm. So I went up to him and I said, "Can you help me with this? Can we just mill our own tampers? Can we just do this?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So he made me a whole bunch of tampers, and he measured. I contacted my basket supplier and I said, "Send me 100 baskets and I'm going to send back half." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And so we measured all the baskets' inner diameters. We figured out the exact gap that fit best for the tamper and the basket. And then we sent back all the baskets that were out of tolerance. And we figured out, hey, this works, because at the time, my business partner was doing barista competitions. And there was one competition where I sent him with a bunch of tampers and said, "Look, this pre-VST, the baskets weren't standardized." So I said, "Look, the baskets aren't going to be standardized, and this occasionally screws up competitors because their tamper gets stuck." So I said, "Take all these tampers, check out the 3 baskets that are on your machine or whatever, and find the tampers that fit them perfectly." And in his competition, he was the only competitor whose tamper didn't get stuck in the smallest basket. Anyway, but these are all super small things, right? I was the first person to talk about a flatbed in percolation brewing. And of course, at first people were like, "Oh, screw you, that's not important," or whatever. And then people started caring about it. And then that led to my friend Dan and I built those 3D printed spray heads for the Curtis and the Fetco, the litmus spray head.
I've got at my cafe as well to this day.
Yeah. Because, these little incremental improvements really matter, right? And I think all these things add up. Maybe each individual thing is not that big a deal. All these things add up to something where the coffee gets to another level.
Well, I use this analogy pretty regularly, and I've probably already mentioned it on the podcast, but you a Breaking Bad fan? You seen Breaking Bad?
Don't know much about it.
Well, there's 2 meth cooks in it. There's obviously Walter White, and there's Gail
You're
Bedecker.
a meth cook in this analogy.
Hear me out. Gail Bedecker fantasizes about Walter White because his meth's 97% pure, but Walter White's is 99%. And that 2% difference or whatever is just everything to him. He's like, "I don't know how you got there." Yeah. Is that kind of where do you kind of see it in that light as well?
Yeah. I mean, I get it. Everybody, myself included, everyone has a limit where they're like, "Well, I don't care past this point." Right. And everyone's point is at a different place. And a long time ago, I was at an extreme place, and it helped me make things better.
Have you ever driven yourself mad trying to achieve?
Totally.
How mad?
I mean, in the 90s, my cafe was open 7 a.m. to midnight every day. And I worked every hour it was open. And sometimes I'd finish cleaning at 1 a.m. and I just had experiments that I could not sleep until I would do them. So I would just stay up another hour or two, do the experiment, and then do that. And I would do that for months on end. And but I was young.
I once.
That's regardless of being young. That's some wild time frames there. 7 a.m. to what, like 2 in the morning.
Yeah,
sometimes.
but that was the only time that I wasn't busy, so I could actually do this thing, and no one else was around, so I could actually just focus and do it.
I once opened like a pop-up store, like that I was going to have for a few months, but it took me for 3 days. I couldn't get the coffee to taste right, and I didn't know why. And at about the 2.5 day mark, I ended up just snapping. I was with one of my friends and like I couldn't get the coffee to taste good and I had no understanding of why. And I started breaking things and swearing and just went absolutely nuts. And I just had this one idea I was like, the last thing I can do left, it was like Captain Jack Sparrow's last shot. The last thing I could do was change the water filter on my machine. Turns out the water in St Kilda is so soft that like you can literally not make drinkable espresso with it. And even a flat white, I changed it to a magnesium filter. Everything was fixed.
So a very similar thing happened to me last year where Prodigal did a booth at the SCA Expo in I don't remember where it was, Chicago. And the water they provided at the show was awful. Alkalinity was in the hundreds, like 200 something. And the coffee tasted horrible. And I just kept making coffee. I kept trying different things. I kept trying different bottled waters. I was like, felt like caffeine poisoning. My business partner and I both felt like I feel sick, literally. And I was like, if we don't solve this by the end of the day, we're just quitting. We're not keeping this booth because the coffee just did not taste good. And once I realized it was the water, then we sent people out in the city to try to find stuff, and then eventually we realized we could get some distilled water, and there was some third wave water packets for 5-gallon jugs in the next aisle over. So we got some of those, and then we added some like Lotus magnesium to it, and then it actually tasted good again. But I really was losing my mind. Like I was so frustrated. I mean, we traveled so far, we spent so much money, we felt sick on caffeine, and just it was just because we were sabotaged by bad water.
But you also lost it once when you found out that you weren't Italian.
Oh, yes. So,
a week ago on the pod, there was bottles of water tipped over his head, shirt ripped open, buttons popping.
The shirt's just there. The shirt. We're keeping it as a prop forever. That's the shirt. And one of the buttons was just here.
From the seams, right on the table.
Oh, yeah. There's a button just over there on that. Can you pass me that button that's on that chopping board,
Scott? So you're not Italian? Is that what's going on here?
No. Yeah. So it turns out I'm Scottish. So I've been walking around thinking, geez, I'm Italian. That's one of the buttons.
One of our questions for a lot of our guests, it's a polarizing question, is ravioli or xiaolongbao?
Yeah, which would you choose?
What is that second thing?
Xiaolongbao is like a
dumpling.
Yeah,
it's like a soup dumpling. Or just any dumpling in general. Shumai.
I don't eat gluten, but back when I did, ravioli was my favorite food.
Oh, there you go.
So
gone down that way.
I like that.
Right.
With the
Italians. Where do you stand on my statement? The reason I was copping flack was because I stated I was in Italy and I was like, Italian espresso is really bad. And I was like, but it kind of makes sense because there's like everyone needs to be able to afford espresso there. It needs to be like €1 on the counter. You get your stuff. So it's crappy coffee. It's dark. It doesn't taste great. And that was my statement. So I was getting told by Kirk that I was terrible and I was disgracing the Italian race. And he would then claim that he was 6.25% Italian. But thoughts on the Italian espresso? There is, and I went on to say there is more specialty spots popping up around us in Florence. There are places.
So I have a friend who's an anthropologist, and we were talking about this once. And what's interesting about Italy is that espresso is €1, and it's been €1 for 30 years, and the quality has gone down. It went from something like 70-30 Arabica to Robusta to 30-70 or 20-80 over these 30 years because green coffee has gotten more expensive. And it's still €1 for a shot. And yet, cheese, wine, prosciutto, you name it, Italians have hundreds of grades of quality, and they'll pay. They'll pay different amounts. And he said he thinks that it's that coffee doesn't come from Italy. The prosciutto does, the cheese does, the wine does. And if it's from Italy, they value it as a specialty item, and they will grade it to death. And if it's not from Italy, it's a commodity. And so coffee is just coffee because it doesn't actually come from Italy. So that's why they're not differentiating between Kenya and Peru and extremely high quality, extremely low quality, because it's not Italian.
What a take!
This is simply my friend's opinion.
That's like if you watch the F1, I think the Italian Grand Prix is it Monza? What's the one they have? I forget, but the track where they race, like the Italian one, when they cheer on Ferrari, it's always the most rowdy. Like that's undoubtedly. Rowan, I'm going to skip a question here. I'm doing a time jump because I shotgun asking this question. If you're allowed to have one more coffee before you die, where is it sourced from? Who's roasting it? And it can't be you. And who brews it?
Who brews it? Can Mila Kunis brew it?
Mila Kunis? Sure, yeah.
I don't think she will, but I would appreciate it if I'm about to die.
Mila Kunis. If Scott ever enters palliative care,
I think we figured out what the number one thing on his passion list was right before coffee.
I mean, I hope she doesn't mind the 15 minutes it would take. I would probably borrow some Kenya from a friend's freezer from way back when.
George Howes?
I mean, I'm sure George has some lovely old Kenyas, but it's just impossible to get Kenya like they used to be. Probably my business partner, Mark, or Paulo. I have another company called Regalia in New York, and they're both incredibly competent roasters. Either one of them, I'd be happy to have them roasted for me. And
was it true that I think it was Chris Barker was really annoyed because Jared Truby made the best cappuccino you ever had or something like that? Was that? I remember you telling a story. So Captain Cloud.
There was something like that years ago when they worked at Verve, and I told Jared that the cappuccino was amazing, and Chris was like, what? He was so frustrated.
And before we get into the extra hot takes section, which is the greatest section in all of Coffee Podcastery, I was kind of you kind of blew my mind, and I kind of think I understand why you don't like naturals as much as washed. And you explained to me last week because there's a much higher rate of Quakers in natural coffee. Can you explain that?
I would say it's not that I never like natural coffees. It's that there's really two things that happen very often with naturals that don't really happen with washed coffees. One is that oftentimes naturals have a very intense fermenty flavor, right? Might taste a little bit cheesy at the extreme or something like that, and sometimes like a little bit of a fake fruit flavor. The second thing is that Quakers are present in large numbers in basically every natural I've ever seen. And Quakers tend to make coffee taste nutty, kind of astringent at the extreme. They can be quite bitter or a little bit acrid. And they're much more prevalent in naturals. So it's very hard to avoid those flavors with naturals. And now that we use an optical sorter to remove Quakers from coffees, we become a lot more sensitive to those flavors, and it's really hard to not notice them in naturals. Quakers tend to taste stale earlier than the mature seeds or the regular beans do. Quakers tend to have fade, which is another defect, a little bit sooner and more commonly than the mature seeds do. So a lot of the problems that are in coffee happen first and more intensely in Quakers.
And sorry if I missed it, why do we get more Quakers in naturals?
I don't necessarily know why there's more to begin with, but I would say that simply that there's not a flotation stage in the natural process. You miss an opportunity to remove a lot of the Quakers.
So with the wash process, to bring the listeners up to speed, often with the wash process, we'll dump the cherries into like a bath or something, and then the bad cherries will kind of float to the top. So obviously they're just easy to remove, and you can't do that with natural processed coffees. Well, the opposite of washed and water is heat, and
is it?
I'm trying to.
It is.
Well, screw you.
You're 100% right.
You do the segue to the next take. You do it. You sabotage everything, Rowan.
Well, you're one of the best roasters in the world, and all I can say is, have you got a roaster in here right now? Because it's starting to heat up. It's time for an extra hot take with 2 sugars. We got there in the end.
We did.
It was beautiful.
You screwed my bed, but we'll get there in the end. I mean, I probably could have said something factual and it would have, been better, but I digress.
Yeah.
Now, this is the greatest segment in all of Coffee Podcastery. You may have heard. I'm sure you already knew.
Actually, I haven't heard. Sorry.
Oh,
I know.
Well. You thought I threw you under the bus.
Well, there's a bus out there. I'm just going to walk in front of it if you'll just excuse me. Okay, so what we do is outline our hot take. So if you could just stare down in the barrel and give the listener your hot take with 2 sugars.
Okay, so I just want to say that everything I say turns out to be a little bit controversial, and even if I don't mean it. So I don't know, but I think you're going to see humans disappear from the roasting process pretty quickly.
Ooh,
yeah. Okay. I mean, we're already there. There's already the Roost 3 kilo machine has an optional loading cell where you can put 100 kilos of green coffee in there and tell the machine repeat this roast 30 times in a row, 3 kilos each, run this profile, drop it at this temperature or time, and then run this between batch protocol, then weigh, load, and repeat 33 times. So conceivably with that machine, you could remove the human and just let the machine go for 5 or 6 hours. And actually, I think that that's going to be wildly appealing to certain types of businesses, maybe small cafes that want to save money on roasting or do something different with the roasting, but not necessarily have the labor involved or the expertise involved. And I think that 10 years from now, that's going to be incredibly common.
Well, think how much you can drop the cost if you just go, what's the green cost? And I just put it in that machine and walk away. You know, it's hard to say no.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to roll off with my extra hot take with 2 sugars next. And my extra hot take with 2 sugars is, who cares what a customer orders? If you're a barista, just fucking make it. Like, if it's decaf, it's got a little bit of hot milk and a long black. Like, sometimes I hear people whinging about it. And it's like, well, firstly, you don't have to drink it. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard to make. They're paying money. Who cares? You know, just
Agreed.
make it.
Agreed.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, like I don't understand why people complain or roll their eyes. If it's extra hot, like my girlfriend, she likes her coffee extra hot, and sometimes like she's had people like kind of make fun of her in front of her face, and it's kind of like it's a bit of a negative experience for her because you know she's in a different country, she doesn't quite understand. It's like, well, you know what, like it's rude.
I actually feel like I took it to the opposite way. When people would order those weirder coffees, I then had it in me. I'm like, they've got a specific thing that they want. I was like, I want to make them the best version of that. So they're like, oh, finally, someone that's actually listening to me and like making what I want. Or the same thing, if someone complained about a coffee, I'd try to be like, oh, what exactly did you not like about it? And they're like, this and that. I'm like, oh, well, we serve double ristrettos here. Let me try to make you one with a single shot. Oh my God, that's so much better. There you go. We've solved it, you know. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, the spiciest of the spice.
I mean, mine kind of goes into a similar approach to yours, but my basic one is you're not cool if you drink black coffee. Stop looking down at people that are putting milk, that are having sugars in their coffee. You're not cooler because you're drinking concentrated bean juice. I sometimes say coffee can be just pure as its form, but it can also just be an ingredient in a larger drink, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Scott enjoyed a strawberry cheesecake flavored cappuccino last week.
Oh, this is what I wanted to ask about. You're talking about how you prefer washed over naturals. How did you feel walking into the other side of the world over here with Mr. Lychee cold brew and strawberry cheesecake? How did that treat you?
I'm the devil.
His Italian heritage took him there, you know?
Yeah. It was an adventure. Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, that one... The peachy one that you put in the milk.
The Lamington.
Yeah, that was quite nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got Scott to say something nice about co-ferment, probably. I think we achieved something in this podcast.
If you were to do a co-ferment, where is it going wrong and what would you do? How would you do it?
So here's what I don't know about co-ferment is, has anybody ever taken a coffee that tastes delicious on its own and then did a light co-ferment with it? Right? Because usually it's a little bit lower quality variety that a producer is trying to enhance and get more money for. So has anybody ever taken, say, like an 87 plus geisha and co-fermented it? And if so, maybe it tastes delicious, right? Maybe because most co-ferments are built on coffees that were kind of mediocre to begin with, like maybe starting out with a better raw material, there could be something amazing there.
I believe CoffeeNet does do a co-ferment geisha. Don't know if it was like 87 points and then...
Right.
And you also said light co-ferment, right? Like,
so
just
I think
subtly,
it's generally a bit overdone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my biggest complaint about co-ferments is that it's a little bit too much in your face sometimes. I had a coffee that it turned out, I bought the coffee and it turned out that there was a whiff of something weird in it that shouldn't have been there. And it turned out that the same barrels had been used previously for a co-ferment. In other words, this coffee wasn't a co-ferment, but there was a taint from the barrel. And actually, it was quite delicious because there was just a little whiff. You know, when something goes from a bug to a feature, in a sense, right? I mean, if there's too much of it, it's a bug. It's overwhelming. But there was that little whiff of, the little je ne sais quoi of like, oh, what is that? What is that? What is that? And
what's je ne sais quoi?
It's like in French, it's like...
Come on, Frenchie.
Yeah.
It means like technically like I don't know what, But it's like this elusive flavor that was really interesting, but it was so subtle. It
Well, I like how it kind of happened by mistake as well.
Yeah.
So it's like you won't really be able to repeat it.
Right.
Maybe. Or, maybe you can just use that same barrel again and again.
Or someone will figure out how to do it at that level intentionally.
I mean, they're doing it with alcohol with all the different barrels. Like, learn that, like, kind of flavor taint coming, like different whiskey barrels and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, it could be a method going forward. Does that bring us to the end of today's podcast?
Well, I believe it does, because you've got places to be, Scott, and we really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you sort of saying yes, because I was just straight up in your face, like, Scott, you want to come on the podcast? And you're like, yeah, sure. And so, and lo and behold, here you are. So, it's always, great having you in Australia, and we wanted to take advantage of obviously you being here. But thanks so much again for coming on and enlightening the listeners on coffee roasting, and best of luck with the rest of your trip. So you've got some classes to teach, and look forward to seeing more of what you got in the future. And by the way, the prodigal coffee that you served on the weekend was absolutely delicious. Thank you so much.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming by. I appreciate it. And I also want to finish the pod on just haven't done it in a while. Little shout out to Kirk. Just say Project Zero Coffee, making some of the best coffee in the city. It's not only that, it's the care there that's put into it, both behind the scenes and during service there. So you're always going to get an amazing product. Make sure to go down to Project Zero Coffee if you get a chance. It's great stuff.
Oh, thank you, Ral.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And you can order some coffee from Scott as well. So getprodigalcoffee.com. Is it? What's the website?
Yep.
Getprodigalcoffee.com.
Getprodigal.com.
Absolutely delicious.
All right.
So thank you so much, Scott.
Yep. And reach out to us if you need. hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com. Send us your question. Let us know if you want to send us some coffee for us to taste live on the pod. We want to give as many local kind of roasters a shout out and give them the airtime that they deserve. And that kind of wraps us up for the week here. I'm Rowan Cook.
I'm Kirk Pearson.
And it's just coffee.